just like the nature of the game is that you better be right, you better have receipts, and it better be the kind of thing that it actually matters. And I would bet that Tucker would agree with that at this point.
Mm-hmm.
And so now there's this big battle royale in the conservative influencer space, which is like, in some ways it feels like it's just drama, but in a lot of ways it's much deeper than that.
So recently, Ian Carroll went on the Sean Johnson podcast to talk about the truth regarding Israel and the Tucker and Candace versus Nick Fuentes debate, with hindsight in mind, with a lot of the things that have come out after the first days of that clash, that schism, whatever you want to call it. So let's get his take on this. Please like the video and subscribe to the channel.
It's a big can of worms.
Yeah.
And for anyone that doesn't know, there's infinite context. We can never explain all of it. But Nick Fuentes is a whole context to his own that I don't think anyone really has the full context on. He's been doing his thing kind of off in the shadows because he got so shadow banned and so taken down from everything. He's been doing that for like 8 years or something. I think it's almost 10 years since he like really started. And he's young. He's in his mid-20s. And he's really smart. And he said a lot of shit over the years that's super controversial. But, you know, he's a very polarizing guy. And he's never been afraid to call out, you know, bullshit, to call out people that he sees as inauthentic or that aren't with it. And he kind of is like it's the Jews guy. And he's been growing more and more, especially ever since X started back up. And then he got let back into X, like, you know, 6 months in or something. And there was this big Twitter space where like Andrew Tate was there and Alex Jones was there. And then a bunch of the liberals came out, like Destiny came out. It was like a whole bunch of like big, just like characters. And there were some funny Twitter, you know, spaces that ensued, but he started to grow back up since then and become more and more prominent again. And his clips circulate all the time. And he sort of is this like underground movement. And he's got this whole following of people called groypers, that are like the anonymous frog accounts that are always posting Nazi shit on and like calling people faggots on Twitter, from behind the frog accounts. And they are like, holy shit, a force to be like, man, the groypers are funny. I like them, mostly. And
Well, the clarity and context I'll add here is a lot of these types of individuals that gravitate around Fuentes believe that people that are even critics of Israel, like good, powerful, persuasive critics of Israel, like Dave Smith and Candace Owens and Tucker Carlson, are limited hangouts to the extent that they don't believe that Zionism is a result of a natural extension of Judaism. He believes that, you know, regardless of what you might think about the differences between sects, etc., of Judaism, that the Israel problem is a Jewish problem, and a lot of the best critics of Israel are Jewish, and they would be limited hangouts in his mind. He has beefed with people like Dave Smith for that reason.
And there's this other thing that's been happening simultaneous to Nick sort of like coming back into the light a little bit and back into the mainstream a little bit, from being forced out, is that on the side, Tucker's been a big part of this, but there's been other people that are just sort of like, everyone kind of has their own opinion of him. And there's been some that are sort of like, don't talk to him. Like, don't listen to him. Like, he is delegitimizing like genuine criticisms of Israel or genuine criticisms of neocons and genuine criticisms. And like, you don't want to associate with him. And then it broke out on Tucker's podcast where he just like, him and Candace, who had both sort of been beefing with Nick specifically, and Candace had just had him on her show and it'd been awkward and the whole thing.
Yeah, I heard it fell flat.
It was a little confrontational. And I haven't spoken to Candace about it. I'd be curious what her perspective on it all is right now. But
Well, it's helpful to note that, yeah, there was beefs between Candace Owens and Nick Fuentes. They had an interview, but prior to that, they were beefing. Same sorts of things seem to rear up. Nick seems to think that Candace is something of a limited hangout because she doesn't seem to think that the root of Israel's atrocities is Judaism itself. You know, I think that, you know, Nick had called Tucker, you know, at least CIA, you know, adjacent or a limited hangout before that too. That's something a lot of people don't bring up before this. That said, you know, it was bad I think, a bad look and immoral for Tucker Carlson to say, Nick Fuentes is this gay kid in the basement. Doesn't seem like that's clear, and even if it was clear that he was gay, it would be inappropriate to bring that up. So I think there's culpability on both sides here to some extent, for sure. But there were beefs before this incident. A lot of Fuentes' fans want to make you think that this is the start of the beef, just like the neocons want to go for, just looking at the day before yesterday to justify everything that, someone does in response to something. There were beefs before this.
But because they were both kind of in beef, Tucker just like went straight in on the podcast and just sort of like started laying into Nick and like said a lot of the quiet stuff out loud that he sort of has been in that camp of, but has never really like said it in public. And sort of called Nick a fed and like this like gay kid in the basement. That's like, who is this guy? Like he's just delegitimizing like the real voice.
Yeah, and made fun of him because he's from Chicago.
And that was a mistake, a big mistake. Not only because it's just kind of like a low blow. It's just like not good form to, if you're going to go after someone, sort of like influencer to influencer, so to speak, in this world, just like the nature of the game is that you better be right, you better have receipts, and it better be the kind of thing that it actually matters. It's not like a little petty thing. Like you don't just like go after people. Because it looks bad. It's not a good move to just go attacking other people online.
Yeah, I mostly agree with this, though those receipts do exist. Tucker kind of danced around it. He kind of insinuated that Nick Fuentes goes against, good critics of Israel, like good people on those issues that have raised awareness about Israel's atrocities, the U.S. alliance with Israel, the U.S. relationship with Israel, and the AIPAC's lobby. Their influence in the United States. Nick has beefed with a lot of those people like Candace and Tucker Carlson and Martyr Maid, that's Daryl Cooper and Dave Smith and Cenk Uygur, all these people that are good on the Israel issue, if nothing else, even if he doesn't align with them otherwise. But yeah, it was a low blow for him to call him a gay kid. We also know that Nick Fuentes was at January 6th with the bullhorn saying things very reminiscent of what Ray Epps said, go into the Capitol. There's video of this that exists. He basically says at one point, the Capitol is basically ours now, urging people essentially, or, implying that they should go into the Capitol. That has raised a lot of questions about whether, he had Fed influence, just as the questions Nick has raised toward Tucker's Fed influence. So those receipts existed. Tucker just didn't bring them out in the specifics.
Well, and it certainly looks bad when you're older, you're of the old guard, and there's a young kid who's 26 years old that's coming in, and he speaks very eloquently. He's definitely very studied, right? And he comes in and he's like stirring the pot. And then you're coming down from, your attic and making fun of this kid and like calling him names. And it wasn't even like he was calling out what Nick was saying. He was just making fun of him personally. Yeah. He's calling him gay. Lives in his mom's basement, from Chicago, it's just ridiculous. It's like, that's such a bad look for him. Yeah, you are so much higher and bigger than Nick Fuentes. Why are you doing this? There has to be a reason. And we all smell it because that's a desperate move he just did. Why is he doing that?
Well, if you're a Nick fan, you'll say it's because Tucker's a Fed, that he's an asset, that he's out there to, diminish the influence of Fuentes, and everyone other than Fuentes are just limited hangouts or CIA assets. Even those people that are good critics of Israel and the CIA and U.S. foreign policy and U.S. debt and central banking, like he believes about many of those people. That is, trying to steel man Fuentes' argument. It's not mine, but that's the argument he has, that, everyone else other than Fuentes is just controlled opposition.
Yeah, it's definitely the definition of an unforced error. And I would bet that Tucker would agree with that at this point.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, just to step out of the morals of it all for a second, it's a tough game. If you're going to throw shade at someone, if you're going to try to like outmaneuver someone in the public square, it's a hard game. Because everything is public and every word you say matters, and the way you say it, and you can only say it once, and you're in the middle of a podcast. And so like, even if Tucker was like working for the CIA directly and was like on a smear campaign of Nick Fuentes, still a super hard job to accomplish. And I'm not saying that's what he's doing, but it's he made a mistake and he did it all wrong, whatever the heck he was trying to do, whether it was like just like a loose cannon kind of a day in his brain where he said some dumb shit, or whether it was like an actual like thought up smear that he was trying to like level correctly. Didn't do it right.
And that happens. We all have off days. And
Yeah.
I think there's another scenario not enough people talk about is that they were all in cahoots, the secret collusion angle to this, that Candace Owens and Tucker Carlson and Nick Fuentes all kind of started these beefs to amplify each other's influence. And maybe that's not as plausible if you apply an Occam's razor compared to the other scenarios, but I think this beef sure has risen the prominence of all three of those people, certainly so, whether or not they meant it to be that way. I think that actually the beef between Ben Shapiro and Candace Owens, turned out that way too, though those two clearly weren't colluding, so you never know whether it's advertent or not, but I think that's at least a possibility to consider here that no one's talking about.
say dumb shit. It's normal.
But then Nick fired the fuck back. Like Nick put down two of the most powerful, talented performances of oration that have been on the internet in the last like 5 years. And the first one really directly aimed at Tucker and his dad and Tucker's family and his history that is very clearly like straight from the CIA. Whether he's like officially in the CIA today or not, it's pretty clear from the evidence that came out that was always kind of public. It just had never really been like dug through all at once. That you're not the son of one of the most influential and successful CIA operatives of the Cold War. That then grows up like flying around the world with your dad and like your helicopter's going down on that vacation. And on that one, you're like in some like in Bosnia or something. And you're like in this picture, you're holding an AK-47. And in that picture, it's like you don't get that sort of early life history and not be connected to the
most
CIA
people,
in some form.
Most high school kids aren't vacationing in Venezuela.
Exactly.
Okay, all right.
But that's also something not to hold against Tucker. The fact that his dad worked at the CIA. Yeah, the CIA is a criminal entity. It deserves to be abolished. I think Tucker Carlson bashes the CIA, rightly so, today. But hey, Tucker Carlson himself was a neocon. That seems more pertinent to his background. He's rejected that too. Is there never a redemption arc for anyone? If you're a Christian, don't you believe that Paul was on the better path compared to Saul, who persecuted Christians? I myself was a neocon. We all have to come to penance with certain things. And, the sins of the father argument isn't doing it for me. If you're going to accuse Tucker of being CIA because of his father or saying the right thing about, whether he knew and when about whether his father was both CIA or, involved in the deep underground of the CIA, that seems immaterial in the long stretch. In the grand scheme of things, if you ask me, it's more about what you're doing today, how you're influencing people, what kind of content you're producing, people in this space like Tucker. What I'll say is, Nick Fuentes created 2 to 3 episodes of, hours long attacking Carlson after this, probably 5-minute segment of Tucker's show. And here's what Tucker did after that. He skewered Israel by having Stephanopoulos, that nun that lived in Palestine, on the show, Agapia Stephanopoulos. Very powerful episode revealing Israel's atrocities and how they treat Christians negatively, just as they treat Palestinians negatively in that region. And Candace Owens exposing Israel too on her podcast. She's focusing on Macron a lot too, but also on Israel and Epstein. And meanwhile, you have Fuentes doing 2 to 3 episodes attacking Carlson for a stupid remark in a show. It does seem like most of his ire is focused on good people on his side of the issues of the Israel issue, and it's worth asking why.
And so it, let's be clear. Not all CIA is bad. Like, not all CIA, there's every branch of our military and our intel agencies and all of it, they all are very complex organizations with a lot of people involved. And a lot of them are true patriots. And even a lot of the people that have been in the CIA over history that did things that when you look back at them, they're like, that's the deep state. Like, oh, that was evil. Like, oh, you read our mail. Oh, you bought out our news companies and all these things. Yeah. But a lot of those things were populated by patriots as well that either got sucked up into an operation that they didn't have control over, or were misguided, or thought they were doing right but didn't, or like some of those operations did very important things for the country but still look bad in hindsight.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, all the CIA is bad. On this I disagree with him on, but he is right that many people that have worked for the government in CIA or even the military, you know, they had a sense of patriotism, an honest and candid sense of patriotism that was twisted and perverted by aspiring despots and totalitarians and empire builders for the wrong things and in the wrong direction. Some people were caught up in that in the CIA just as in the military, but the CIA should go away. It right now serves not for gathering intelligence, but for, you know, enacting regime change operations, propagandizing Americans, taking control of the media. Look at Operation Mockingbird if you doubt me on that. Mind control programs like MK Ultra. These are the fruits of the CIA. It's not providing intelligence to defend the country. It's providing intelligence and propaganda to make war against other countries. That's its role now.
Them were just fucking evil.
Right. Well,
But like, it's not black and white, right? Like, just because Tucker's dad was in the CIA running Voice of America and all this stuff, like, does not mean he was an evil man. And just because Tucker grew up around that doesn't mean he's an evil man. But it does mean that there's layers to what's going on here, and that there's layers to Tucker's associations and to Tucker's perspective on the world and his agendas. And that's kind of what Nick was pointing out. And Tucker also made another unforced error by saying that he didn't know that his dad was CIA until he died. His dad died, just like this year, which we know is not true because Tucker's on camera previously over the years saying directly that he knew his dad was
as early as last year.
Yeah. And as well as long before that. And so he just volunteered that out of nowhere, almost like trying to explain something out before it became a question of like trying to make up and it's like, dude, whoops, big mistake.
Well, this is because Fuentes had accused him essentially of being a CIA agent, and that is true. There are inconsistencies of Tucker Carlson saying, you know, when he knew his father was CIA versus when he died. I think he died at the beginning of this year or something, and he had said, you know, even on a podcast last year, I think it was the Sean Ryan podcast, that he knew his dad was CIA before he died, something like that. There are inconsistencies there, but there's also a plausible reading of that episode of Tucker Carlson with Candace Owens on it, where you can see him saying, well, he didn't know his father was part of the deep underbelly of the CIA and involved in that sort of thing until after he died. That might be true, but nonetheless, this does seem to be an inconsistency, whether you think he lied or not. But that seems, you know, infinitely less concerning to me than what he believes and where he's pushing people, and that is to question the Israel First narrative. That is to question the U.S. ties to Israel, AIPAC's influence in the United States. You saw that on display with Ted Cruz, where he skewered the senator for being Israel First, telling Tucker Carlson he was obsessed with Israel, when it was really Ted Cruz that said 5 minutes before that he aspired to be the most pro-Israel senator in the country. You are seeing Tucker do a good service against the Israel First mentality. That seems to be much more important to me than whether he got all of his facts straight regarding his dad's past. I mean, Nick has also said Tucker Carlson's essentially a CIA asset, by the way. You know, that's not covered that much, but he did say that, and that seems to be equally stupid, immoral, and backward as when Tucker Carlson said that Fuentes was a gay kid in his basement in Chicago. I mean, both of those things are unfounded. They're not substantiated by the facts, and both parties deserve to be criticized for it.
And so now there's this big battle royale in the conservative influencer space, which is like, in some ways it feels like it's just drama, but in a lot of ways it's much deeper than that, because like these things matter. It's like, imagine if the New York Times, CNN, MSNBC, Fox, CBS, imagine if they were all at war with each other, and at the end of it, you know, 5 of them would be destroyed and the other one would rule, right? That matters. That's going to change the landscape of media. That's going to change the landscape of information and journalism. Power, everything going forwards. And that's what we're sort of feeling right now in the conservative influencer space, because it's not just those 3. It's like Charlie Kirk is drug into it because Nick has been asking to debate Charlie for years now about Israel. And Charlie just runs away and makes up bullshit excuses and, brags about how many donors he has and all this bullshit.
Well, we can all agree that's retarded. Charlie Kirk is horrible on the Israel issue, and, there's a clear angle for him to just evade Nick or discussing or debating Israel, not only just with Nick, but other critics of Israel he doesn't want to debate. I think for obvious reasons, it's basically impossible to support Israel now. It looks even worse than it did a year ago, with major conservatives like Marjorie Taylor Greene now rightly calling it a genocide. You don't want to be doubling down on the genocide and starvation right now. It's a bad look, and even prominent neocons have stopped talking about it a lot. At least what happens in Gaza and what happens in Israel.
Bullshit.
Oh yeah, I saw that video.
That clip was so atrocious.
I got 1,000 employees and
we win. They blame the Jews. He's just a lot of jealousy. A lot of jealousy.
It's like, what?
It's like,
why?
Okay, Charlie. Yeah, Nick is jealous of how many Jewish people donate to your organization.
Yeah, I think we can all agree that Charlie Kirk's terrible no matter how you fall on this question. But look, the thing at the end that Ian said, I kind of disagree with. He said, this is a big deal. And this is, likened to a situation in which, there's MSNBC and CNN and Fox News, and a few of those remain, and some of them go away by their reputations being tarnished over feuds like this, but I'm not seeing that pan out whatsoever. If anything, Candace and Tucker and Fuentes are all more prominent since this beef happened than before it, and whether you think that was advertent or not, that was intentional or not, is, an open question, at least worth considering. I don't tend to think that. I do tend to think that this was a beef that manifested in the form of podcasting, but all three of those people have their platforms raised as a result of this. I think Dave Smith, too, he's on the periphery, but in Fuentes and Candace's interview, where Candace was holding that podcast, she brought Dave Smith up, and he's the beneficiary of gaining some more notoriety from this, too. So that's what I think you're seeing here. Like I said, I think that Nick is an interesting guy. He's being avoided by some people. He's polarizing, but I don't think it's right to call Tucker Carlson a CIA asset unless you have cold hard proof. He doesn't. The best he has is that his father was CIA, and Tucker either lied or made contradictory statements about when he knew his father was CIA. But that doesn't even seem to be the most pertinent thing related to Tucker Carlson's past that you could even attack him on. He was a neocon. He admits it all the time. He has made penance with it. He talks about how stupid and foolish he was, and he was, and guess who else was? I was too. There's other people that were not just born dissidents. There were people that grew up in the establishment and faded away. That's been true throughout history. William Pitt was different than William Pitt the Younger. William Pitt the Senior was a sympathizer with the Americans during the American Revolution. His son was a tyrannical despot that unveiled the biggest censorship scheme in British history. So there's all sorts of results and situations like this. And if you're going to attack Tucker, I would attack him for, things that he's bad on, not that his father was bad on. And I do think that Fuentes gets into that. Fuentes takes way too much of his time focusing vengeance and ire upon people that are good on the Israel issue. So I think it's worth asking why. Comparatively, Tucker and Candace expose Israel on their shows, bring in a lot of, laymen and new people that aren't necessarily immediately attracted to dissident culture to questioning Israel for the first time, and that's an immense service. To the extent that Nick does that, great. I just don't think this is a Judaism problem. I don't think that Israel's criminal government, just like the United States government, is not a Christian problem. Christian Zionism is just as problematic in inspiring and funding the madness and atrocities in Israel as Orthodox Jews' support for the same. That's just the truth. If you're going to tell me that Norm Finkelstein and Glenn Greenwald and Aaron Mattei and Max Blumenthal are all, limited hangouts because they're Jewish, I think that's wrong. I don't think that Nick has said that categorically, but he has danced around that fact that, this problem is a Jewish one and not an Israel one. And I do think it's an Israel problem, and it's a problem with Christian Zionism too, and the dispensationalists among us that believe that funding Israel is necessary for the second coming. and just all these other absurdities that can't be founded or substantiated through the biblical text. But let me know what you think down below. Is Ian Carroll right about this? Who do you side with on this feud? What do you think about what I said about it? Do you think I'm mischaracterizing anything? Let me know down below. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel, also subscribe to Sean Johnson. Great podcast with Ian here. And please consider becoming a YouTube member. If you click the join button below, you can help support the channel, and in return, I'll give you access to all of my videos before they go live to the general public on YouTube. And until I see you guys next time, no more war, no more debt, no more inflation, and no more empire. Peace out, guys. Catch you in the next one.